Last time we talked about spiritual fasting and physical fasting. We talked a little bit about hardships and struggle, particularly when it comes to Great Lent. Now we're going to continue this theme, but the title of the lecture will be Asceticism, and what is its benefit, and what is asceticism, and why do we stress it particularly within Great Lent, and what kind of benefit does it have for the soul and the body. So again, this is Saint Syracuse of Kosimov, this wonderful little book. And he says, Christ commands us to live a life which is strict, a life of ascetic struggle. He shows the gates of heaven to be narrow and straight, the path to salvation to be difficult and full of sorrows. Again, this seems hard to swallow, but we're going to kind of dissect it a little bit and see what benefit it is to our souls. They that are Christ's have crucified the flesh and the passions and lusts. Many talks ago, we talked about how the passions were the sicknesses of the soul. And passions are that which kind of is within our heart that allures us and draws us to the things of the world. So, as he's quoting here from Galatians, they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh and the passions and lusts, says the Apostle Paul. Whoever wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. What does it mean to take up our cross and follow Christ? We're going to dive into this. And he himself, in his own life, went on the path of the cross and accepted death on the cross. See, Christ did not shun away from self-denial. Christ did not shun away from a life of the cross. You see, he too had a path that was narrow, confined, and full of sufferings, the path of the cross. Remember last week we talked about how if we don't take on voluntary sufferings, at least a little bit of asceticism or self-denial, then we're going to probably have involuntary sufferings in our life, which helps us to get on track, to help awaken our soul. He suffered for us, Christ suffered for us, and left us an example so that we might follow in his footsteps. The apostles, the martyrs, the holy hierarchs, the monastic saints, the righteous ones, and after them a whole throng of the faithful believers went by the path of struggles and sorrows. Boy, this sounds kind of depressing, right? But again, we're going to talk about why this is the case. They went on the path of struggles and sorrows, that is, by the genuine path of Christ. Struggles and sorrows is the genuine path of Christ. We're going to, again, find out what this means. And we too are obliged without fail, he says, capital letters, to go by this path. There is another path, but it leads to destruction, and a multitude of people are going by it. Meaning, you have the wide path, which is full of luxury and full of, ease and comfort. And then you have the narrow path, which is full of struggle and suffering. But again, what does he mean? We're going to find out. To us, Christ has said, enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat, because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few be there that find it. So you have the narrow path and the wide path. Few find the narrow path, many find the wide path. The narrow path and the strait gate, this is what the Christian life of ascetic struggle is. Now he uses the Russian word podvig. The narrow path is a life of podvig. We're going to find out again what this means. This is fighting, he says. This is struggling with the flesh, the passions, and the world. Right? So one person made an analogy that if you're in a river, the world is pushing you constantly, and the stream is constantly going against you as a Christian. And if you don't struggle a little bit to walk against that current, the world is going to swipe you away and going to bring you with it. So there's a sense of fighting within ourselves of this energy of the world. This is struggling with the flesh, the passions, and the world. Again, the passions are the sicknesses of the soul. We know what the Christian faith and the Christian law requires, that which is opposite to our natural old man. Basically, what is the Christian life? The exact opposite of what our old man desires. That is the Christian life. What is the will for God for me? Just do the opposite of what our old man desires, and that's the Christian life. It requires that we live not as non-believers do, but that we know how to form a life exactly opposite. So again, the Christian life is something opposite from the world. The Christian life is something unique, separated from the way that the world operates and thinks and moves, right? There's something exactly opposite that the Christian life has. For true Christians, he says, labor, vigil. Vigil means self-awareness or being sober. Prayer, fasting, repentance, purity of soul and body, all of the virtuous and holy life are unfailing obligations. Is this easy for our sinful nature? Is not constant effort needed here? Are not constant struggles here commanded? What he's saying is the Christian life is not easy. When we sign up, we don't say, okay, I'm just going to now, God's going to bless me with wealth. God's going to bless me with comfort. God's going to bless me with all the material things that I ever want, right? The Christian life is not the prosperity gospel. Christ does not promise an easy life. But what he does promise is he promises a joyful life in his kingdom. He promises his presence. He promises himself. But this does not mean worldly happiness. So the Christian life is not the American dream. The pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of, whatever. It's like, no, actually the Christian life is not any, it has nothing to do with the American dream. The American dream, there's certain elements that can be good in terms of providing for your family or something. But again, we can see a Protestant kind of mentality in the American dream that if I work hard and if I do industry, then God will bless and materially. And that may be the case, but the Christian life is, I'm just going to do whatever God wants me to do. I'm going to do it with love, and I'm going to work hard. But material prosperity is not the end game. The end game is to be with God, and to participate in the gospel. So, the gospel is even greater than the American culture. We might say that, obviously. So let's separate even the gospel from Americanism, we might say, right? Because the gospel it predates the American civilization. So that's pretty self-evident. But what are we struggling against? What is our constant effort here needed? Why? Why all this struggle? At the root of our sin, at the root of our passions, there lies a disease. The very foundation of our being, there is a disease. And what is this disease? And if we can cut at this disease, the root of this disease, then all the other passions that spring up from this disease can also be eradicated. And this is what Elder Milinos and the other fathers of the church call self-love. And this is what he has to say. Self-love is the root from which all the passions sprout up within us. Like weeds, if you pull one up, more will follow, since the root system is below the surface. So what does he mean here? Irritation, gluttony, the lust for power, lust for fame, acquisitiveness, avarice, wanting to acquire goods and material things, wanting to acquire riches. At the root of all these vices is self-love. So what is self-love? If we can chop away at self-love, then all the other vices can begin to be eradicated. He says, self-love is an attitude of mind, a disposition, and above all, a judgment, which is filtered through the prism of the ego. This means we judge things by our own ego. We see the world and we judge people by our own ego. This is what self-love is. It is like a film that has covered the eyes of my heart, he says, and prevents me from seeing the world clearly, because everything is distorted through the lens of the ego. We can see this practically. We can say, because of my ego, that person wounded my ego, therefore, they're not worthy of being loved or something. when the gospel says to love everyone no matter what, it doesn't matter if they've wronged you, if they slapped you on the cheek, you are to love them, But if our ego is wounded, then we tell people, don't love that person, be aware of that person, be wary of that person. Our judgment has been filtered over with this film, like he says, right? We're not seeing that person clearly because our ego is getting in the way. And so we can see how the ego ruins and influences our life all the time. This person is in the way of what I want. I want what I want and I want it now, and this person is in my way. So I'm going to, get angry at them, or I'm going to talk bad about them so they can get out from their, position or whatever. Or this person did not provide for my needs, so I'm going to take revenge. Again, all this is the root of ego and self-love. But if we eradicate self-love, then we won't have the desire to succumb to the passion to want to have revenge or something, This is what he's saying. Whatever I think or see or desire that has its origin in my ego, or what is another way of saying ego? Self-will, he says, will surely separate me from God. Only the denial of my ego can prevent me from being violated and wounded by the passions. Again, the passions are these things that spring up with us involuntarily or sometimes voluntarily. And we say, there's a sore, there's a wound in my soul. This is the passions. So we can identify a passion if someone, gives us a snark comment or something, And if we say, why did he do that? Then there's a wound there, there's a passion. And then if we succumb to these passions and then we act on these passions, then it can ruin our soul. Meaning, if we get angry at someone because they were angry at us or something, this is the passion that can ruin the foundation of our soul. But what is the end? What's the aim of rooting out this self-love? We will see. So listen again to Elder Emilianos. Again, Elder Emilianos was an abbot on Mount Athos, and some people call him a modern-day saint. He just reposed a couple of years ago. But his writings are very wonderful, and they help us to kind of cut through a lot of these things that we wrestle with in our lives. This is why we love reading these things, because the saints can help us diagnose our sore spots and our wounds. It can help lead us on the right path. This is what he says. He says, you can see from this point of view that self-love is not a passion, by which I mean it is not one passion among the many passions. Again, what are the passions? Passions are, avarice, anger, frustration, gluttony, love of money, vainglory, love of fame, pride. All these are passions. So self-love is not just one of these little passions. Rather, again, he's saying this is the origin or starting point of all the passions. Just as God is the beginning and principle of every good, so too is self-love the beginning and principle of everything that is bad. In fact, he says this is why the devil fell. Because if you remember, the devil is known, his name is Lucifer, which in Latin means lux, or which means light. So Lucifer was made in the image of God. Lucifer was a created image of God. So what happened was he fell in love with himself. He was the first narcissist, and he fell in love with his own image, but his image was the image of God. But the mistake he made was, this image is my image, And so likewise, we are made in the image of God. And so our mistake is, wow, look at all the good things in our nature. It must come from me and not from God, who is the source. And we fall in love with ourselves. And this is what happened with Satan. He fell in love with himself. And likewise, when we fall in love with ourselves, as Satan did, then we fall like Satan did. So self-love is basically the reason why Satan fell and makes us like Satan. But self-love is not evil, he says, right? It's just a distortion away from self-love, from the proper use of self-love. What's the proper use of self-love? The proper use of self-love is to take care of us spiritually. to take care of our soul spiritually. I want to love the health of my soul, the spiritual health of my soul. So I'm not going to go and drink, for all night or whatever, So this is a good source of self-love where we say, okay, I'm going to go to church because I want my soul to be healthy, I want to go to confession so my soul can be pure. I want to go to Holy Communion so I can partake of God Himself. So this is a way to turn self-love away. Again, we can recognize when it's a bad use of self-love, when the passions, when anger and frustration want to lurk its head. Right? God did not create evil. God is not the source of evil. Right? It's just, evil is just a distortion of the natural use of something that was supposed to be good. And this is what sin is. Sin is just basically a distortion of the natural use of our powers, which is something profound, right? Sin is a missing the mark. Sin is not directing our energies towards God. Sin is directing it away from God. So if we sin, we just basically say, how can I redirect this anger towards its good use, right? How can I redirect my desire, which I had for, indulgence? How can I redirect that for its good use and its good purpose? My reason, my rational, how can I redirect that towards God? This is really how we can reorient ourselves. So, through our ego, if I identified with my ego, he says, then I see the world and God Himself through the distorted glass of my self-regard, my self-will. Right? We don't quite see the world rightly. This is why we constantly debate, why people constantly debate about how politics should be run or how the world should be run or how things should be. Because we're not quite seeing the world as it truly is. And the reason for that is because of our self-love or because of our ego. So what can we do? This is the reason why we have asceticism. This is why we have the great fast. This is why Christianity has struggle, right? Because we have to struggle to deny our self-will. We have to struggle to deny our self-love. Oh, I really would, and we can see this in our marriage, or with our kids. What do you want to do today? Oh, I really want to go to the beach, Oh, I really want to go to the park or something, And you have these self-wills and someone has to give, Otherwise you're going to battle about what you're going to do. So there's a struggle to deny our self-love, even in our family interactions. And this is what he's saying, is that the Christian life is a constant self-denial of our own self-will. And so Christianity and ascetic struggles, he says, are two inseparable things. We can't just have our self-will, and just have it fly off the rails and lead the Christian path. Christianity and self-denial, basically, is another way of saying ascetic struggles are two inseparable things. Either you are who struggles in podvigs and thus a Christian, or you avoid podvigs and do not wish to carry them out, and then you aren't a Christian. You've turned aside from the Christian road. You've fallen back to the broad path and have lightly and freely begun to head towards destruction. Again, what does he mean by destruction? You know what? I'm not going to deny my will. I'm not going to deny my selfish interests. I'm just going to do what I want, and I'm going to do it now, and I'm just going to, I don't care what anyone else wants or whatever. I'm just going to do it, Or if I'm angry at someone, I'm just going to fulfill that desire and just be angry with them. Rather, because sin is the misuse of our energy, we have the power naturally to redirect that anger. Meaning, we don't have to get angry at someone if we don't want to, Oh, I'm really angry at this person and I'm going to let them know about it. Wait a second. I don't have to be angry with that person, This is what self-denial is. Oh, is it really hard? Boy, I really want to be angry at that person. Is it really hard to not be angry? Yes, but I'm going to not be angry, And this is what asceticism is about. It's the denial to want to act on our impulses, Oh, I have this impulse we could take it on an easy case. I have this impulse to want to indulge in cake or something. Okay, I don't have to. I can have just a little slice or something. I don't have to eat the whole pie. But again, more practically, I'm frustrated with someone. I can either act on that frustration or I can just love them. I have that ability to choose. We are not our emotions, is what he's trying to say. We are not our thoughts, is what he's trying to say. We can ignore our emotions and we can ignore our thoughts, as difficult as this is. It's very difficult. This is why he's saying asceticism, self-denial, and Christianity are both intertwined, right? You can't be a genuine Christian without wanting to struggle in some regards. And again, struggling against our self-interests. So again, let's dive a little bit deeper into this. As we said, the first struggle is against our self-will. And we do this particularly within Great Lent. What is the second struggle? The second struggle, which is connected to the first struggle, is our spiritual battle against Satan and the demons. But what does this mean? And how does this manifest itself? And how can we combat a spiritual struggle? Well, we know that Satan is a personal entity, right? We know that that evil is not some abstract, impersonal essence that just floats around. But again, Satan was created as a personal angel. So he has being that was created by God. Nevertheless, he's created. He does not have the same power as God. No way. He's so very small in comparison to God. He's really powerless in comparison to God. But nevertheless, he has a personal entity. But because he has misused his energy, he's not really a person. And again, we can go into that later if we have time. I don't know if we will. But how do the demons tempt us? This is really where we're getting at. Either directly by themselves or indirectly through other human beings. It is important to know when it is the former, right? It is important to know when we're being attacked by demons through other human beings, or when we're being attacked directly from a demon himself that we are experiencing. The demons themselves tempt us when we are alone, just as they tempted the Lord in the desert. It is when I am alone by myself that the devil comes to tempt me, because there is no one else around me. So he tempts me directly when I'm alone, and he attempts me when I'm around other people, indirectly through other people. Now what happens is we tend to blame that person for tempting us, right? Or attacking us. And again, we'll get into this in just a second. But one saint says, if a tiger was attacking someone, and you had a dart gun, would you shoot the person being attacked by the tiger, or would you shoot the tiger that's attacking the person? Well, you would shoot the tiger to try to save the person. Likewise, when someone attempts us and attacks us, it's not necessarily them that's attacking, it's Satan that's attacking us through them. So we really can separate them from the sin because, it's not really their fault, God, it's really just Satan tempting them, So don't hold it against them, but go get Satan, go get him. But the person that's being mean to me, God bless them, don't. Forgive them, God. They're just being attacked. One saint wrote, I'm being attacked by Satan through my wife today, And he recognized it, that it's just Satan, and that way he can still love his wife in the midst of it. So we have to kind of be aware of what's happening here. So this is why he says that when, on the other hand, I live with others, then the devil comes to tempt me through those around me, just as the Pharisees tested and tried the Lord. In this way, the devil tempts those living in the world, which is us, through other people, either through personal attacks, false accusations, treachery, and deceit, to mention only a few. And we're all aware of this. We've all experienced this. For the most part, the greatest spiritual problem facing those living in the world, which is us, is other people, right? How we act with other people. This is the biggest spiritual problem. If then I'm living in the world, again, here's a monk on Mount Athos, so he's separated from the world. So he's speaking about us. Together with other people, I must be prepared in order not to be bothered or troubled by them. So this is our spiritual task, is to prepare ourselves not to be bothered or troubled by other people. If I have the right attitude, the right frame of mind with respect to them, I will be able to live a life free of temptations and remain untroubled by what goes on around me. Wow, this is a great thing, right? So we're not talking about changing the world. We're not talking about changing others. You better act right or something. No, it's rather changing us so that we can be prepared to handle the trouble that other people bring on us. We don't want to change them, like my wife. I don't want to change her. My job is not to change her. My job is to let her be free. She can do whatever she wants. If she wants to be upset, she can be upset. If she's in a grumpy mood, she can be grumpy. That's not my aim. My aim is not to say, honey, I want you not to be grumpy anymore. That's not my role. My role is to prepare myself to be able to handle when she is grumpy, or something, or she's having a bad day or something. I need to be able to prepare myself to be able to handle when things change. This is what he's saying. This is why it is necessary to know what we are dealing with and how to prepare ourselves for it. Since it is a given then that I live with and have social interactions with others, I must remain completely unaffected and undisturbed by the troubles that will inevitably arise from these interactions. I need to dispose myself in such a way as to be ready to experience anything and everything from them. What does that mean? From our interactions, again, us being married are probably most of our difficulties and things come from probably our family life. This is just how it is because we're around them all the time. This is just how life is. God, the family life is the arena to sharpen our soul. So this is a good time to practice all these things. And for the single life, again, it's with our work, it's with those in the church, it's on our other interactions from day to day. So we want to be ready to experience anything and everything that comes our way from our interactions. Difficulties, hardships, stress, temptations, and more, he says. At the same time, I have to set aside all my passions, or at the very least, not act on them so that they do not disturb me and create additional problems. If I choose a path other than this one, right? If I choose a path other than wanting to prepare myself to handle these difficulties, I will not be able to have a spiritual life. What does he mean? If all I want to do is just get angry when things change or get disturbed or, try to change people, then this is not the path to the spiritual life. If I constantly want to go to my wife and say, change, I need you to not be grumpy, or I need you to, to be a certain way or something, this is not the path to the spiritual life. The path to the spiritual life, again, is just if my kids are screaming, as difficult as it is, to just sit in that difficulty and pray and love, And I remember the most revelatory thing I received from someone in Greece. Again, this changed my life. As he says, when someone is upset or something, or someone is, if there's difficulty around you, do not pray that the difficulties cease. And there's a profound statement in here because, again, the reason why we want the difficulty to cease is because of self-love. Because I don't want to go through the difficulty any longer, you see. But sometimes there needs to be difficulty within our lives, the struggle, the hardship for us to go through. Because maybe the other person just needs to get something off their chest or something, or I don't know. But the point is not to pray that the difficulties cease. Like if we have problems with our child, let's take an extreme. Let's just say that they're into drugs or something. This is a hard case, I don't know. We want to pray that they return to the church, yes. But We want it to be not so that our ego is, if someone comes up to say, boy, your kids are in drugs, and then our ego is hurt, This is not why we want it to change. We don't want it to be self-esteem. We don't want things to change because of our self-esteem, but we want it for their spiritual good. So sometimes we just need to sit with them and not want things to change and just sit. You know what I mean? And in that sitting, then sometimes they're healed and then they say, oh, wow, you really listened to me. Well, I didn't really say anything, But you just sat with them in their difficulty. You didn't want to change them or something, which is actually can be healing. And this is why we have a lot of psychological diseases in our American culture, because we want our culture wants us to be a certain way. You have to have 2.3 children and you have to have a successful career, and people feel so pressured, and then if they don't meet these obligations, then they feel like they've let everyone down and they feel this shame, and that leads them to drugs and things like that. But if they can just have the freedom to be who they are, and then maybe there can be healing. So this is what he's trying to say, is sitting in the difficulties, and as difficult as that is, this is a podvig, the denial of ourself. He says, I may inflict a host of bad things upon me, but he can never actually harm me if I maintain the right attitude to him and to the larger situation. But from the moment I forget or fail to understand the devil's trap, right? The devil is trying to get me, which he has baited with the love or hate I harbor for someone else, with my feelings or attraction or repulsion, triggered either by a smile or a bitter word. You can see what insecure and treacherous ground I am on. I was reading an article where someone did a mass shooting because, a girl did not smile at him, as she was passing by, and he said, oh, I can never get girls or whatever. And then he went and, and it was unfortunate. The point is the soul is unstable and depends on other people's reactions towards that person. And then the soul has no footing and the soul is unstable. So what he's saying is, how do we create a stable soul so that even if people are mean to us, or if they smile at us, or if they frown at us, or if they're rude to us, it doesn't matter, The famous story of in the desert was, he says, Abba, monk or saint, I struggle with people. I like it when people talk well about me, but I struggle when people talk bad about me. What do I do? And he says, what I want you to do is go to the grave. And I want you to start yelling insults at a grave. We probably have heard this story, I don't know. And tell me what the grave does. And I want you to start yelling, positive things about the person. And tell me what the grave does, the person does. And he comes back, he says, okay, what happened? Well, I was telling insults and he did nothing, And I was telling wonderful things and he did nothing. So likewise, when people speak well of you, do nothing. When people speak bad about you, do nothing. Just have it just wash over you. And this is what he's trying to say, is how can we establish a soul that is not swayed by every emotion or something that's around us? And this is asceticism. This is podvigs. This is why we have the great fast, to try to bring some kind of foundation to our soul. So let us describe practically what are podvigs. And then we'll end, and then we'll go into something next time. What are struggles? How can we do a self-denial? How can we try to create a foundation to our soul, and so we don't have to be so self-willed? This is very difficult. This is a lifelong thing. We're not going to get this right away. He says the time of the fast has come. Let's say Great Lent, right, which is coming up next week. For 7 weeks, almost 50 days, we may not eat what is non-Lenten. The first week, the week of the cross, and the Holy Week are especially strict fast. Is this hard? Yes, very, especially at the middle and in the second half of the fast. The flesh shrinks, protests, and demands that we feed it to satiety. Right? Even we're at week 3 and we're like, boy, this is difficult. But force yourself, he says. Take the upper hand over the body and spend the whole fast as you should. And if you master yourself, then here is your first podvig. What he's trying to say is we don't have to listen to our desires. Our desires are not who we are. If we desire, to eat, we don't have to necessarily eat, which is a good thing. It's like, I really want cheesecake. I don't really have to have cheesecake, I mean, I could if I wanted to, and there's no shame in that. Again, it's not legalistic. It's just, okay, I don't really want cheesecake. Okay, I have the power to not have cheesecake. That's basically what he's saying. Has the time to prayer come? Force yourself, and here is a podvig, right? We may get up in the morning, we say, I don't want to pray. Everything inside me doesn't want to pray. Well, I can still pray, It's like if my son says, hey, Dad, let's go out and let's pray. Son, I'm going to go do prayers. Well, let's go play. Well, we'll play after prayers. No, let's play. No, I'm gonna pray. You can choose to pray even if you don't want to. And this is probably one of the most wonderful things within the Christian life, is to realize that we can do something even when we don't want to. And this is very difficult to do, but this is a struggle. This is the podvig that he's talking about. Is it time to go to church, but it's hard to do so? Does one thing or another detain you? Does one thing or another draw you away? Take up your arms, leave everything, and go. And this is, again, I'm stressing this, but, again, we may say in the morning, I don't want to go to church. Well, again, we don't have to listen to our desires. Just go, That's kind of what he's saying. Doesn't matter what you want. Just go. That was the first thing I remember one of my spiritual fathers said. If you don't want to go to church, it doesn't matter. You don't have to listen to your desires. Just go. It doesn't matter. Our kids throw a temper tantrum. Daddy, I don't want to go to church. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're just going to go. Again, we don't have to listen to our desires. This is what he's saying. And if we can turn it around and just deny ourselves and just do it, then that's fine. And again, if there's times where we can't go to church because it's, extraneous circumstances, then again, this is not legalistic. But the point is we don't have to do what we want, basically. That's what he's trying to say. Does the singing last a long time? Is it hard to stand? Keep yourself to the end of the service and wait until the dismissal, and here is a podvig. In church, are you lacking a desire to pray? Is there coldness in your heart? With bows or prostrations, with attentiveness, with effort of will, do your best to overcome this unwillingness, and here is a podvig. Do you hear mocking of faith, gossip, ridicule, or idle talk? Turn away, avoid it, or at least be silent, and here is a podvig. It's very difficult to be silent, when people are talking about other people. Very difficult, but if we can deny it, then this is a podvig, he says. Are you being forced to get angry, to contradict, or to argue, right? And again, boy, that urge comes on, that passion comes on. Your wife says something, your husband says something, your kids say something. Oh, you really feel this urge. This is a passion, We feel this urge inside of us. Recognize that this is the unnatural use of our energies. I can really get angry. But he says, no, you can actually just yield. Okay, just pull it back, Yield, he says. Okay, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. You can yield. Keep in check the tumult of your agitated heart, and here is a podvig. Do you have something you cherish, but someone has expressed a desire to have it? Give it away, and here is a podvig. Do you have enemies? Are you able to take revenge on them? Oh, I really want to get back at that person. He says, just stop, just again, pull it back. Self-denial. Don't take revenge, but that is not enough. Forgive them, but even that is not enough. Rather, do good to them. This is surely a great podvig, he says. Saint Dmitri of Rostov says, whoever forgives his enemies and prays for them is a wonder worker, a doer of miracles. So it's not just enough to stop our anger from someone, but to pray for them and to forgive them. God bless you, God bless you. Again, that tiger analogy. It's not the them, it's the tiger. God bless you, has an opportunity for an unjust or dishonest gain turned up for you. Turn away. And here's a podvig, Here's $100,000 if you could just do this. Or here's $200,000. Or here's $100 if you could just do this. No, I'm not going to. And that's a podvig. Is your unruly flesh demanding pleasures that are not permitted by the law of Christ, such as unnecessary fine clothing, he says? Refuse it, and here is a podvig. Is the world calling you out to an amusement, to a game during the fast? Stay home, and here is a podvig. Do you feel like reading a worldly book, listening to or playing music during a fast? Restrain yourself, and here is a podvig. And here's the greatest Podvig, he says. He says, do you live well in the material sense? Do you have everything you need and even extra that you are able to store away? Remember the hungry, the barefoot, and the unclothed. Look at life around you carefully and seek them out. Satisfy their needs and don't sigh and be remorseful about what you give them, but do it with joy. So it's not like, give them money, and then if they say, this is not a lot, what are you doing? And then you say, well, I shouldn't have given it to you. Just give it to them in joy. Here's some things. Oh, this is nothing. Why did you give this to me? Well, God bless you. Here it is. Just don't worry about their reaction, he's saying. Just do it with joy. Just give it. It doesn't matter about them. Just give it. And here is a podvig, a brilliant podvig, he says. When you give to a person in need, it is actually Christ who is invisibly stretching out his hand and receiving. And incorruptible wealth will be accumulated for you in heaven. By all means, without fail, adopt this podvig. What he means is the giving of the alms. It is obligatory for all Christians. At the dread judgment, he who has given alms will hear from the Lord, come ye blessed. But he who has not given will hear, depart from me, ye cursed. Do not excuse yourself on the grounds of your lack of means, right? I don't have any money, right? But remember the 2 mites of the widow in the gospel. The Lord said that she gave more than all the rich. So again, he lists a whole bunch of other podvigs that he says. But the point is that he says, is this hard? Yes, it's very hard. Is it hard to enter into the narrow gate? Is it hard to deny ourself and deny our self-will? You betcha it's hard. As they say, is this very hard? Yes, it's very hard. But there's no other way, he says. There's nothing we can do about it. Another path to blessed and eternal life does not exist. Because if we just succumb to our passions, if we just get angry at people, if we just have dishonest gain, if we just hold everything for ourselves, this is not the Christian path. This is not the path of blessedness. If we don't have any kind of self-restraint and we're just arguing with people all the time, or whatever, or we're just, having full of gluttony all the time, again, this is not the path. No other blessed and eternal life exists. Here, let us suppose that it were possible, and here we're going to end with this. Let us suppose that it were possible to get into the house where your family and loved ones are. Right? All your family, everyone that you love is in this house. But there's a small hole which is very difficult to get through. Right? And there's no other way in but to squeeze your way through this little hole in order to get with those whom you love. Would you do this? Of course you would, he says. And there would be no end to your joy. And that uncomfortable hole that you went through would be forgotten. And this is what he's trying to say, is that the difficulties and the struggles of our life, the podvigs, the fasting, the vigils, the prayer, the self-denial, is all forgotten when joy is had. And again, he says, with a snake sheds its skin, and if it doesn't shed its skin, it will die. And here you see the instinct for survival forces the snake to seek a pile of brushwood and stones, and it squeezes and forces itself through this heap. The sticks wound it, they tear off its old skin, and the snake slithers out of the heap, leaving behind its old skin. Although it is all wounded and bloodstained, it is boundlessly glad that it has stripped its old skin from itself, and knows that in its stead a new one will grow. So likewise, the old man, this is how the skin of the old man is stripped out. It's through struggle. It's through hardship. It's through pain. It's through self-denial. There's no other way about it, he says. But let us not be terrified of pain and sorrow, of being straightened, of being, squeezed and sore pressed, or even of death itself. The Lord will uphold us and will say unto us his great and consoling words. Right? He talks about how a woman, when she gives birth, after she gives birth, she doesn't even think about the child labor anymore because she has the joy of the child in her and in her hands. And this is the same with us, that when we sorrow, then our heart shall be rejoiced, and no joy, the joy that no man shall take from you. This is the joy like the joy of a mother. So you shall weep and lament, but the world shall rejoice, and ye shall be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned to joy, he says. In the world you shall have sorrow, but be courageous. I have overcome the world. So this is what he says. And so let us arise, he says. Let us take up our cross and follow Christ. And let us walk with a firm step, decisively, and not looking back, right? Remembering the saving words, the Savior's words, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom. What does that mean? Looking back to a life of ease and a life of comfort and a life of, boy, isn't it nice just to take it easy? A life of taking it easy does not exist. Obviously, we can have relaxation. I'm not saying, it's a constantly, constant go. But what he's saying is don't think of a life on the beach, in a hammock as the ideal life. This is not the narrow road. And as soon as we will begin our path of the cross, immediately at that very moment, help is ready for us. Invisibly and inaudibly, our Lord and Teacher will draw near to us and will place his shoulder under our cross and will walk with us. And so light will our cross seem to us to be, and how joyful will it be to carry it. Wow. So, again, we have the self-denial of the will, which is a struggle. We have the attacks from demons, which come mostly through other people, which is a struggle. But this is what asceticism is all about. This is establishing ourselves. Asceticism is denying ourselves, going to church even when we don't want to, fasting even when we don't want to, praying even when we don't want to, holding back our anger even when we don't want to. All these things. And it's not legalistic. If someone else gets angry, God, let them get angry or whatever, that's up to them. I'm only responsible for me. How do I change the world? I change it through me. I can't change the world. There's no military action in the Christian life, It's just, I'm just going to change me and everyone else can do what they want, But if I change myself, then everything else I can react to other people in a more positive manner. And this is the whole reason for asceticism and for Great Lent. Are there any questions or comments? We could talk about them. This is just such a wonderful topic, which if we can grasp even just a little of this, then we'll be blessed. So again, whatever. If not, we can just sit in this as well. So. Okay, let us pray.